of interviewing a little feedback. Tananarive too, our guest of honor. Just a brief bio that will sort of ground us all in discussing her work. Du is a writer, teacher, and activist. She's a former distinguished visiting scholar in the humanities at Salon College, where she taught screenwriting, creative writing, and journalism. She also teaches in the creative writing MFA program at Antioch University, Los Angeles, which is where I met her. And in the BA program at UCLA, we'll talk a little bit about that as well. The American Book Award winner and NAACP Image Award recipient is the author of 12 novels and a civil rights memoir. In 2010, she was inducted into the Medill School of Journalism's Hall of Achievement at Northwestern University. Her novella, Ghost Summer, received the 2008 Kindred Award, and her collection of the same name has been nominated for the NAACP Image Award. She's a leading voice in Black speculative fiction and is currently teaching a 6-week, that's a little over there. Anyway, right? And we will talk about the fact that she's also executive producer of Horror Noir, which is on Amazon's new Shudder channel, and I highly recommend watching it. It is a marvelous, completely coherent, like an hour, like 23 or something, that encompasses film history in such a clear narrative form, especially in Black horror, and it goes from Birth of a Nation and the true horror of Black history into horror of present. So anyway, welcome to Tananarive.
Thank you for that.
So, starting at the beginning, when did you start spinning stories, and how did you end up writing horror?
Always spinning stories. I have the visual proof because when I was 4 years old, I wrote a picture book called Baby Bobby. You know, you take the typing paper and you fold it in half, and that's a book. That was Baby Bobby, the little stick drawings. And I wrote on the back, Baby Bobby is a book about a baby. And the author is Tananarive, so I was already just self-identified. I spelled author wrong. I wasn't a genius, but I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to write stories. And I started out as fantasy. I think all children kind of do, right? Because magic and spaceships and all that stuff and science fiction all seems close enough to touch. A talking cat, all kinds of stories like that. And then I became I didn't really start to more seriously self-define as a horror writer until after graduate school, because I was kind of trained away from genre in my creative writing classes. Some of you may have had a similar experience there. And so it didn't even dawn on me to do what I loved until much later.
And we had talked earlier about a specific incident, I believe, while you were in high school that really got you on the road to writing.
Oh, okay. When someone knows you well, they make you tell all your stories. Okay, so in terms of really understanding the impact of what writing could have in my life, like it could be a life-saving force and not just something I could do for fun or even for a living, came when I was in 9th grade. In 1980, there had been a famous case in the news of a motorcyclist named Arthur McDuffie, who had led police on a chase. By the time 12 officers caught up to him, they beat him basically to death with their flashlights. We're like, oops, that's going to look bad. So they beat up the motorcycle to make it look like he crashed. And almost got away with, well, they did get away with it because they were acquitted, but they almost got away with the whole thing not even being aired, except for a reporter named Edna McKinnon, who did an investigation and uncovered the cover-up. But even so, despite all that, they were all acquitted. And that was my first Black Lives Matter moment at the age of 14. I probably really thought the words, wait, we don't matter. I mean, it's like, just like this, you have an image that you're a citizen and then you're not exactly. So it was, I wrote, there were riots in Miami, or I should call it rebellion in Miami, and then I wrote a sort of a prose poem called I Want to Live. And I was just describing a utopian society, you know, and that, in the writing of that, I just felt like this pressure ease up in my chest, and I was like, okay, I can. And my mother told me that that's the difference between not being out in the street burning something up and burning something up have writing as an outlet, and I always took that to heart.
And so from then, when did you start writing? When did you feel like you started writing like you?
That took a long time. I mean, I'd always loved horror. As I discussed in the documentary, and I have told some of you personally, my mother loved horror, and I was raised on it. So there was always some horror movie playing on the TV, the old black and white Universal movies, any movie that opened up, we were always there, always about horror. But as I said, I was trained away from genre. So by the time I graduated from, I got to finish my master's at the University of Leeds in England as a Rotary Foundation Scholar, which is a great program, still in existence, they pay for everything.
Was that in English?
It was in English, so I studied creative writing as an undergraduate, thought about getting an MFA, but decided to go to England and get the MA instead, because England was more interesting. But by the time I finished all that, I wasn't writing women characters, I wasn't writing black characters, and I wasn't writing genre, I was writing white men. In fact, the first short story I sold was an imitation of Ian McEwan when he was a short story stylist. So it was a quirky story about a white British guy. And so it really took some doing to actually find who I was as a writer. And I discussed this earlier today, but two things happened. I read Gloria Naylor, Mama Day, which was both literary and metaphysical, which was like, wait a minute, you can write metaphysical and also be considered literary or whatever, which was important to me because of coming through the writing programs, you have to understand. And then also, what was the second thing? Anne Rice. I interviewed Anne Rice when I was a reporter for the Miami Herald, and I asked her how she responded to criticism that she was wasting her talents writing about vampires. I didn't make that up. There was a big New York Times Magazine cover story about her where critics were literally criticizing her for writing about vampires. So I said, how do you feel about that? And I braced for her to be upset or angry with me for bringing it up. But she was like, that used to bother me. But my books are taught at universities. And I don't hear another word she said because that was all. It's like, oh, her books are taught at universities. Off to the races. It's like, so I guess I can write horror. And I can be a black woman writing horror too.
And she sold a few, so.
Yeah, that's true. But you have to understand though, and I wasn't even really thinking about sales at that time. I was raised by two civil rights activists. Like when I was in college, I could go to a college history course that was teaching the civil rights movement and go to the index page and there's my mom's name. Parting the Waters, one of the great classics of civil rights. My mom's name is in there. So I was not about to go out publishing anything that I thought might bring disrespect to my family, as bad as that sounds now. But as a young person, all those negative messages about genre, really, like the very first day I was in a creative writing workshop, we all went around to name our favorite writers. So the first one I said was Toni Morrison, and they're like, and then I said Stephen King, and you can almost hear the audible gasp because I had dared to say Stephen King's name in a room of learning or whatever. Now he has a National Medal of Art, so Danny.
Yeah, it has changed a lot. How did you come to the My Soul to Keep world?
I have a 4-book series about African immortals called My Soul to Keep. And that was my second novel. That was when it became evident to me that I had an interest in history in my writing, which I really haven't been able to get away from since then. My first book, not so much. But by the time I wrote My Soul to Keep, when you're writing about a 500-year-old immortal, you're writing about history. Literally, history is a character in your book. And that came to me a couple different ways. First, I was dating, and I was meeting disappointment after disappointment. And it was seeming to me that these guys I was dating were presenting themselves as one thing, but were actually something else. That wasn't actually the case. The case was that I was very, very bad at making decisions and choices. I could have perfectly seen all those red flags had I just opened my eyes and wanted to see them. So I came up with this idea, like, what if you were married to someone you had thought was one thing, and they're totally something else, in this case, a 500-year-old immortal, right? It's just a little bit of a stretch. And the other thing was one of those poems I had written in high school called The Eternal Man. And this was during the Cold War, so it's a little bit dated. It was a fear of nuclear obliteration and all that. But it was basically in the voice of a man who had lived through all the time. He had lost wives, he had lost children, he had been lynched. I mean, basically, I've been endowing this character for my story before he had a story. And the last stanza was something like, I need not worry for this planet you see. My tired feet need no place to stand. I'll float, or I'll wander, or I'll drift out in space, for I am the eternal man. So that was the portrait of extreme loneliness. And then in college, I think I wrote a story about a woman called The Anniversary, where it's their 5th anniversary, or maybe their 10th anniversary, and her husband is packing his bags to go, because that's what he said he was going to do on their 10th anniversary, and she didn't believe it, because they had this great marriage, and he had a box full of photographs, and all these great times together, but he hadn't aged and he hadn't gotten sick, and we never knew why, and that was basically the end of the story. So I blended all that together to come up with my soul key.
How long did you sort of dwell in that world in the series of books?
It took me about 2 years to write the first one, and it took a lot of research to fill in the 500 years. And then the sequel was sort of a surprise. I wasn't expecting anything like a series. I was expecting it to be a standalone novel. But there was a baby at the end, and I got curious about what would happen with her. And there's like a 7-year gap between the first 2 books and the last 2 books, because I had no intention of going back again. But then I wondered what that kid would be like as a teenager, you know? So all in all, it feels like I've spent a lot of my writing life dwelling in that world, but also a lot of my writing life away from that world. I had a long break from it. So I don't know how to squash it all together, but 5 or 6 years, I guess.
Did you feel like you missed the characters when you finally did leave, or was it sort of unwritten?
I mean, initially I really did think The Living Blood was it. I had no intention whatsoever of going back to those characters. As much as I loved them, I really felt like I had, you know, I don't want to give it away, but a lot had happened in that book. I thought it was big and meaty and okay, bye. But it was having a stepdaughter who'd been a teenager and then raising a child also. I started to get curious about what an adolescent's view on the world might do to shake up my immortals, how she might differ from her parents and be more radical than her parents, and what that would look like, and what conflicts would emerge. What conflicts would emerge from that? And that was like when I knew, okay, wait a minute. And also, I have to say, George W. Bush also drove me to that book. Also, Octavia Butler had passed away, I think, either right before I started writing it or while I was writing it. So in some ways, and I'm not saying I accomplished it, but when I wrote the book Blood Colony, where, you know, the Department of Homeland Security is basically the villain, it was, what would Octavia write and to confront the times that we're living in? And so even back then, it was anti-immigration, because the character was from a Muslim father, a Black Muslim father. It was mass incarceration with the criminalization of healing blood as a drug, right? So this healing blood is running around the streets, and it's a crime to sell it, it's a crime to buy it, it's a crime to use it, and how ridiculous that is. So I was more so than the first 2 books, I was looking at specific issues in Blood Colony that I wanted to work out through those characters.
We had talked a bit about how genre can deal with social issues. I wanted to circle back a little bit about your upbringing, because you grew up in a house that was steeped in social justice.
Yes.
And if you could speak to that a little bit. We obviously just now saw the influence in your writing, but...
Right. Well, those of you who saw the documentary, how many of you did see the documentary last night? A few of you did. Well, those of you who saw it saw the director, Rusty Cundiff, say that his father, you know, the word black, colored, or Negro was in the title. His father was a member. That was also true for my parents. They actually met during the Civil Rights Movement, and when I wrote the memoir with my mother, I discovered that they really never actually dated. They didn't like, hey, let's go to a movie. It was all meetings and planning, and then they decided to get married. So that was the house I grew up in, and it was before there was an MLK Day. We got the day off from school, and they would play speed speeches all day, and our civil rights friends would come over and tell stories all day. So
Would they write you a note for school that you were missing it, or?
I don't think they cared enough to write a note. I don't know if they did write a note. Maybe they did, maybe they did. But so that was, and my mother was especially, my father was always writing on his legal pad, solving racism, right? But my mother was the oral storyteller. She was and that's why I really had to write that memoir with her, because it was so obvious that she needed to have this written down, and I thought maybe all the storytelling would stop, but it really didn't. But anyway, so, because she wanted, I guess she just really, even despite what I just said about MLK Day, it really bothered my mother that she knew so many people that she called the nameless foot soldiers, right? The people who were just other students with her, just who were instructors at the college who used the mimeograph machine to run off copies and could have gotten in trouble, or the white banker who snuck to the back door and brought an envelope full of money to bail some kids out of, but don't tell anyone, to bail some kids out of jail for a sit-in, or the maid or housekeeper who lost her job when she decided on a whim that she would sit down with the protesting students at a sit-in. Like, she just knew all these stories, all these people. And some she felt a personal responsibility for, like a teenager named George Calvin Bess, that she recruited while she was a church youth group leader and sent to Mississippi during a voter registration drive. And this is another one of those nameless foot soldiers. He never came home. He got killed while he was doing voter registration in Mississippi. It wasn't just James Chaney, Mickey Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman who died during the Civil Rights Era. Those are just the names that we hear. And my mother knew that, I mean, and a lot of these people were my godparents, or were, so I forget your question, but that was my household. It was like everywhere. So it shouldn't surprise me that history is so important in my stories. But the disconnect came in school, because I didn't like my history classes in school. There was one history class I liked as an 11th grader, and she taught from a college book, The Real Story of the Mexican War, which blew my mind. And then but other than that, it just felt like very removed from me, and very sterile, I guess, when I was in
And the history you learned at home was the real.
Yeah, the history at home was the real stuff, and it was gritty, and it was alive.
How was it collaborating with your mom?
Oh, it was something. I feel bad even saying this right now, but my mother passed away in 2012, I should say, which was the biggest trauma of my lifetime. And I'm really, really glad that we wrote the book. Really, really glad. And I also collaborated with my husband, and I don't know how many of you are collaborators out there, but collaboration is very difficult. It's not half as hard, it's twice as hard. So, yeah, it was difficult, and what made it really difficult is that I don't like writing nonfiction. So, I remember once we were trying to sell the book, the concept of the book, to no avail. I mean, we couldn't give it away until my agent came up with the idea of making it a mother-daughter memoir, because we were trying to sell it as a book of oral histories. And one of the editors said, "Oh, why don't you write it as a novel?" And I let it out. And my mom was like, "No." So my agent came up with this brilliant idea to make it a mother-daughter memoir, and I quit my job with the advance. He got us a 6-figure advance. It was crazy. We went from 0 to 6 figures. And I was able to leave my job, and I would show up at her house, and we joked that we spent half the time watching soap operas, and then, because it was hard. We did a lot of interviews, we did a lot of videotaping, we drove up and down the road to try to catch these stories before they were gone, because people were aging. And here's something a lot of people don't realize. Those of you who come from an activist background know this. Being an activist is like being a foot soldier in an actual war, and there's PTSD involved in that. So if you're feeling like you have PTSD symptoms, that is probably not in your imagination. So they talk about the silent generation of World War II, where people would not talk about what happened to them. We found, in researching my mom's book, that there were people who would not talk about what happened to them. That they had never told their kids that they were arrested. They had never gone back to, like my dad was a woman who left Mississippi and then went back. It's just very traumatic, and that became clear difficult for her to relive it. We interviewed Kwame Stokely Carmichael before he passed away while he was ill, who knew my mother. Yeah, and just to see people literally almost dying off while you're in the process of researching the book shows you how fragile that history really is.
So how is it collaborating with your husband? My husband and I, aside from raising kids, we can't paint a room together.
It's great!
Yes, I know, obviously. But how does that process work for you?
Well, it's worked great. Some of those books on my list of publications were co-authored. We have co-authored 6 books together. Both of them series books. Like one was a mystery series called the Tennyson Hogwarts series. We wrote 4 books in partnership with actor Blair Underwood, whose face is on the cover. Those are erotic mysteries, if you want to look those up. And then 2 YA zombie novels. But our primary collaborations are in film and television. Because Steve was working in TV long before I met him. He'd written for the 80s version of Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, Ben 10. He's written for Stargate. I mean, you name a science fiction TV show, he's probably written one script. So and a lot of screenwriters collaborate, and I used to wonder why. And I think it's just that it's such a big process to try to construct a movie. I mean, construction, that's the word. Writing prose, to me, is more like dreaming, and writing a screenplay is a construction project. And it took me a long time to figure out how to engage my joy while working on a screenplay, which starts with this sort of sterile process of a bunch of beat sheets and treatment. And for me, the treatment stage is super tough because I don't inhabit it yet. I'm not feeling the characters yet. So we just wrote probably the best script we've ever written, which we're shopping right now, but it was also a hellish process to get to that point through the treatment stage. Once we got that treatment done, we were fine. But man, it's hard to agree on direction.
Does one of you type, or do you work on the same document together? How do you do that?
So we use a program called WriterDuet.com. It's a free program for screenwriters. And it's kind of like a Google Doc, but for screenwriters. It formats for you. It really is an easy way to learn screenwriting if you're just curious. So I use it when I'm writing solo scripts as well, which I much prefer. But yeah, I do better work with a collaborator. Although in my heart of hearts, I wish I did. Okay, I'll put it that way. But I will write a short film by myself, and that's so fun, just to do whatever. But yeah, we use that, and in WriterDuet, when it's working correctly, you can see what your collaborator added or took out, like the new editions show up in red, and then there's like a ghost with the deletion that disappears as soon as
do you ever get crappy about the deletion?
Oh, of course, are you kidding? Sometimes it's just a matter of like going back and putting your stuff back in.
And this project that you worked on together is also horror.
Yeah, it is horror, because this is a super exciting time, I think, to be a horror fan and a horror creator, right? There's a lot of great horror stuff, really in literature and film all over, so why not? That's kind of where I am right now. I feel kind of bad that it's taken me 5 years to finish or more to finish the book I'm working on now, but the reason I don't feel bad is because I've been investing that time and trying to learn a new medium, and a medium that frankly could be very lucrative if I could just crack it this one time. I've sold scripts but never had one produced except the one we made ourselves. We made a short. But yeah, I feel like we're close. I feel like if we have anything like what it takes, the times are reaching toward us to grab us. Like the times are here. Now it's up to us to reach back and grab the times. So that's what we're doing.
I think you caught the beginning of the wave of those times. I would love to hear a little bit about your class at UCLA, the Sunken Place.
Oh, I hope it's the beginning. Your mouth to God's ear. But yeah, speaking of the times, so I mentioned this a little bit at the screening last night, but I teach a class at UCLA called the Sunken Place: Racism, Survival, and the Black Horror Aesthetic. I had to give it a fancy sounding name, and this all was because of Get Out, and a lot of what is happening right now in Black horror, and probably a lot of marginalized horror, not just Black horror, is because of Get Out. This sort of idea, like, oh, you can put people who are white in a movie and people will go see it, it's still somewhat radical, right? And people will start to figure that out. And I think horror fans, and probably science fiction too, but especially horror, because it relies so much on novelty, I think that's especially ripe for new approaches and new voices. Like when the first time I saw The Ring was entirely in Japanese because we couldn't read the subtitles. It was such an old video. It was like the video in the movie, actually. It was an old video, a VHS, and we were, but I was riveted and I was horrified the whole time I was watching it, and it didn't matter if I could understand what they were saying. That's like a horror fan's dream, is to find something completely new that will scare the crap out of you. And I think that the more we embrace stories that are not the same reheated tropes, and bring in new faces and new traditions, and not just appropriated traditions, but traditions from sort of a position that's more nuanced, right? Like we're always going to have curses and conjure people. I write curses and conjure people, but there's a way to write curses and conjure people that is more interesting than what we've always seen before.
And so I was wondering, and again, if you feel like you're retreading too much of
No.
this, let me know, but I really
Oh, I didn't tell you about the class.
Oh, tell us about the class.
But anyway, okay.
And a lot came of it, so I think it's part of the trajectory.
It's so, because this is like Twitter and this is the times. Get Out came out, I loved it, I was stunned by it. In fact, I'm going to reveal something I've never said publicly at the end of this talk. But so I started planning the course. I09 did a story about the course. The day the course, the story appeared, I was DMing with Jordan Peele about whether he would come to my class, because that's Twitter. Twitter is just that crazy. My agent would have spent months trying to get it, but Twitter cuts out the middleman. So when he came to visit my class, the class kind of went viral because of that. I also teach an online version of that course, by the way, that's MP3s, like you just download it at your leisure. Just to throw in a plug, it's sunkenplaceclass.com, which also includes a 30-minute interview with Jordan Peele that was just a Skype interview he did with me and Steve, because he's that interested in Black horror. You know, that is what he does and he loves, and when he found other people who were also enthusiastic about it, we caught him right before the Oscars, so he was still accessible. But yeah, that course is not just about Get Out, obviously, although it does have some history leading up to Get Out. W.E.B. Du Bois, the great essayist and scholar, published a short story called The Comet in 1920, which is a post-apocalyptic story where the only survivors are a Black man and a white woman. So there's some history to Black creators using horror and sci-fi, horrific sci-fi, which is really what Get Out is, a sci-fi horror, to talk about racial issues. There it was lynching, here it's whatever our modern iterations of lynching are. And it's about other artists who do that, you know. Some of whom were actually at this conference, Cadwell Turnbull, and I know you've also taught Nicole Skyers in your class, and she does her version of horror, sci-fi horror, right? So there are a lot of artists here and there who've been doing it, kind of toiling in obscurity, and Get Out gave them an opportunity to be gathered up, not just in the course, but also apparently in the documentary.
And so, as far as when you're creating a documentary, it's an exploration, and it's asking questions and sort of forming this narrative. And you formed a really coherent narrative. What do you feel, was there something that you learned during this process that you didn't expect to? Or?
Oh, it's all learning for me. Even though I'm a lifetime horror fan, even just getting ready for my course was a big, big learning curve. And you should know, and I mentioned it last night, but it bears repeating, that documentary is based on a book called Horror Noir. I think it's Blacks in American Horror from the 1890s to the present. I think it's a subtitle by Dr. Robin Armines Coleman. And without that book, it would have been very difficult for me to even put my course together, because as much as I thought I knew, she's just like, whoo, she's living it. So in adapting that book, and I'm so lucky as an executive producer, I didn't have to pitch it, which is the worst. God, I hate pitching. And I didn't have to even really write it. I had to lend my voice on camera to talk about the aspects of horror that I know. I gave him some sort of tips on how to approach Jordan Peele. I wasn't in town, so I couldn't do an interview with him, even though that was what he had asked to do, because he didn't go down. Like, he really, but I gave him tips on how to approach that interview and the kinds of things that he would be really comfortable talking about, and the best use of that time with him, as opposed to fishing around for stuff to talk about. And I really enjoyed watching it come together. I think, yeah, a lot of it is, I've rewatched old films that I hadn't seen in a while. I've dived into films that I miss, like Ganja and Hass, which I think a lot of you should. I've heard about it for years, but it was like a myth, because it was in a cage at the Museum of Modern Art, nobody could see it. But now it's out, so you can find it streaming. So, yeah.
There's an entire take on Candyman I haven't even thought of. So what I did want to get to the novel that you're working on now. I've been sort of following your research for many years now. If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're jumping in. But anyway, so soon after my mother died, I was still living in Georgia when I got a call from the Florida Attorney General's office. Those of you who know politics, it was actually Pam Boggy's office, although it was not Pam Boggy herself. It was an assistant who seemed like a very nice person. And apparently my mother's uncle, my great uncle, in 1937 had been buried on the grounds of a school called the Dozier School for Boys in Marietta, Florida. And there were researchers trying to sort of figure out how many kids died in this reformatory. So they were actually exhuming the remains and were asking me as sort of a distant relative to give my permission for them to try to exhume remains. It was due diligence, just calling all these different families. And ironically, when they first called, I thought they were calling about another incident on my mother's side. Her mother's brother was executed in the electric chair as a juvenile in Florida. I don't even think it was for murder. I don't know for sure, but this is why I'm against the death penalty. You know, it's just like so, random, who dies and who doesn't and when. So, but no, it wasn't even about that one. It was about this great uncle I'm not even sure she knew about. Because again, families do not tell these stories very often. They just bottle it up, and it comes out in other ways, like Jordan Peele was saying in the documentary. And we went to the site. My son was about 9 then, and he actually worked with the researchers, digging up, like sifting the soil, and I have pictures from that. My dad was there, and I wrote some blogs about it, and I said, you know what, I want to write a novel about this place, but I want to write a novel so that I can help this kid escape, and that's the only reason I wanted to write it. So it's kind of a spoiler, but anyway. And that's what I did. I started, but the problem I came up against was just like with working with my mom. There's a lot of research about the Dozier School. There are survivors. Robert Straley is one. There are survivors who